always, an AK-47, standard gear, grab and go, which they thought would be a good place to store inside a hospital. And the last item, which I'm sure will be very interesting to analyze, is a laptop. We found it in the MRI room. This is how the laptop looks. I don't know who it belonged to, but now it is being analyzed by our Intel people. Tactical radio communications, which we will analyze. Lots of disks, which will be analyzed. And a computer, which at first glance already provides a lot of incriminating evidence.
And that was IDF spokesperson Senator Jonathan Enriquez giving us a tour of what was discovered in the MRI wing of a Shifa hospital, a separate building. Gentlemen, really quite extraordinary. Just a couple of things to point out. Unlike, say, what was done at the Rantisi Hospital, this was done at what is still an active war zone. I mean, only this part of Shifa Hospital presumably has been taken control of by IDF troops. Just right beyond that building is still a battleground with Hamas terrorists there. Not just there, but under their feet, under their feet as well. And bravura performance by Jonathan Enriquez, doing it in one shot also just to show that this is something newly discovered and it's been found here. I don't know, Owen, if this is going to have the impact that you think the Rantisi Hospital video did, but it's hard to see how much more, I'm not asking that, and the IDF can do. Clearly, they maybe even took some of the criticism, some of the issues you raised and said, this is how we're going to do this particular.
Well, I think what's important here is that I suspect this is the warm-up act, right? This is the opening act. This isn't the main event, right? I suspect that they are waiting. I think Daniel Dari said just as much until after the full investigation and the full process of all the opportunities to done in this case.
We're inside the MRI center of the Shifa Hospital. It's really reached here a few hours ago, and we have cleared the area to make sure that it's safe. And a few of the most interesting things that we have found totally confirmed, without any doubt, that Hamas systematically uses hospitals in their military operations in violation of international law.
That the military and the Israeli government have set for themselves in terms of the scale of activity, even under that hospital, including from that briefing by Daniel Dari with the 3D graphics. They're going to need to find more than this. And listen,
But of course, all that can only come when, for example, the underground complex underneath Shifa is breached and made clear.
But the idea says that not only has operation not ended, it is ongoing, and with no end in sight right now, they're not planning to limit the operation there. I will note that it's interesting, you can see in the entrance of the building, it's the Prince MRI building. Prince Mac is a former Saudi crown prince, and add to that the Qatari hospital that was donated to them by the Qataris, that is also being used by Hamas with an underground tunnel there. It raises the question of this foreign support, foreign aid going in, and these countries need to know what their money is funding, what their money is.
By the way, right now on the screen, this I found quite interesting. These were bands, I wish we would have put it on, showing of medical supplies. Laying there in areas, just bags and bags of medical supplies there in Al Shifa Hospital, and we've been told repeatedly that they're almost out of medical supply, which could be true in certain subjects.
exactly, they're
But still, clearly, just left there.
So the IDF spokesperson has commented on this, saying that given the sensitive nature of the hospitals operating there, they're following very, very closely the situation in each one of these hospitals, mainly Shifa, of course, in terms of how much fuel they have, how much medical supplies they have, and how many places they brought into their community, and they were asked. That's the first operation of the hospital. What is the situation there? I will note that earlier we talked about a Hamas official, Bassem Naimi, was talking about the situation in Gaza. He said that out of Gaza's 85 hospitals, 25 are out of commission. And you can do that to different, given different considerations, whether they're bombed, no electricity, or stuff like that. I think that this shows how they're also trying to present the assault on hospitals as a more egregious assault, in addition to just a regular operation in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, calling on international organizations to come to the hospitals because their human shields have left and gone down south, so they want new ones. But there is the sensitivity of these exposures. I agree with Owen that this isn't the smoking gun. But this is
one building along the very edge of a complex. By the way, we might be the first network in the world to show this, to broadcast this footage. But as I said, this is just one building on the outskirts of the Shifa hospital complex, Jonathan. And you see how it was set up to be used by Hamas terrorists in defense. Just shows you the scope of what the IDF is going to have to deal with as it penetrates deeper into this complex, including underground.
Yes, this is above the ground. We don't know what's expecting underground. And you already spoke here. And we've heard for days and days since the Aryan campaign began that the electricity in the hospital is going to run out in 24 hours. In 48 hours, miraculously, the electricity still goes on. I thought it's about to end, but it's still ongoing. Same as fuel, same as water, same as medicine. And maybe in the Shifa hospital, maybe in the electricity hospital, maybe in other hospitals, maybe medicine and medical equipment does run out for the patients, not for Hamas. They have enough of it. And we've just seen it. Bags and bags and bags of medical equipment. Is it given to the patients upstairs who need it? Probably no. It's waiting there for Hamas, for Hamas terrorists. They have enough, more than enough, way more than enough.
Well, definitely, was really striking to see that piece of footage from the IDF. And yes, Owen, as you're right, I'm sure this was a preview or coming attraction or trailer for the main feature that I'm sure. But unfortunately, that's going to have to come at a heavy price for IDF soldiers and unfortunately for others and civilians there as well. Also, I know Walter, Jonathan, right there. Thank you for joining us. Now, as IDF soldiers fighting on the battlefield, as firefighters and medical first responders who are handling other everyday emergencies on the home front. This now includes dozens of American firefighters who have rolled up their sleeves and given the call to volunteer and help Israel's fire and rescue departments. It's all part of a non-profit initiative called Emergency Volunteers Project. And our own Francis caught up with one of them at the Ashkelon Fire Department. Let's take a look.
Even during times of peace, the job of a firefighter is risky business. But Israel's fire and rescue men and women are prepared for everything. But the terror attack on October 7th caught everyone by surprise.
I woke up on the east side to massive rocket barrages that hit the city that I live in. I responded to several of them. They seem to be direct hits, quite devastating in terms of both scale and quantity, more than I've seen in every other conflict. I found myself shortly after that treating people where I ended up seeing more blood than I've seen in my entire life.
Firefighters here at the Ashkelon Fire Department and all around Israel have seen it all since the war started. But what's made this bittersweet job less bitter is the bravery and heroism of American volunteer firefighters.
the simplicity of how this pump works is amazing.
Like firefighter and EMT Derek Barksdale of St. George Fire Department in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, who left his wife and 4 children to heed the call.
Why did you feel that call when you saw what happened on October 7th?
Personally, I'm a Christian. I get tired of all that, there's a lot of negativity in the United States towards the whole entire situation, and honestly, it's a little embarrassing. And I want to let you guys know that there's support, and we're here to help.
Derek is one of over 60 American firefighters and 100 more on a waiting list who have come to volunteer in Israel since October 7th as part of an NGO called the Emergency Volunteers Project, which has also sent dozens of American medical workers to help emergency services in Israel.
We don't just have have international support in terms of words, but we have dozens and dozens of Americans willing to come here and get into the trenches with us in a sense and fight these fires. Every time I spend a day with our American firefighters here in these fire stations, I walk around with goosebumps the whole day because I feel like we're not alone.
We have bulletproof vests because there are calls that we experience close to the Gaza border where
Derek has himself been through many natural disasters, including Hurricane Katrina in 2005. But he says this is like nothing he's ever experienced before.
the difference is you're dealing with a local community. You're dealing with people from Louisiana. You don't have rocket attacks. You don't have to run to a bunker. Here is just you're in a different country. You're helping people still, but this is war. And the craziness about the whole thing is people here are used to it, and it shouldn't be that way.
In addition, Derek is impressed at the efficiency of Israel's fire and rescue teams, and also the warm embrace of brotherhood.
Firefighters are a brotherhood no matter where you go, but this is a completely different level. I don't even really know how to explain it from the bottom of my heart, how welcoming, how they've taken care of us, and we're trying to reverse the situation to take care of them.
Is it hard to process seeing something so awful that we didn't think would ever happen? My honest answer about processing what happened on October 7th and since then is ask me when the war is over, and I'll give you an answer. We're too busy right now. I just don't know. We don't have time to think about that. Between search and rescue, routine emergencies, rocket attacks, there's plenty to do here, plenty to keep us busy. Morale is high. Morale is even higher knowing that there are Americans here with us. And we'll cross that bridge after the war is over.
In Ashkelon, Emily Francis, I-24 News.
I think you call that heeding the call. Well, we welcome that ends brings to a close this particular broadcast on I-24 News. Day 40. This was for, again, this is to stay with us, continue coverage, the top of the hour to continue. Thank you for joining us. 24 News.
Made for Me, a unique concept in Israel. Custom-made men's fashion to your measurements. Made for Me, designer of all your events. Schedule your appointment at www.madeforme.co.il. Made for Me, official dresser of I-24 News.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Israel is at war. Make an investment in Israel bonds. It is the most powerful and direct way to stand with Israel. Visit israelbonds.com and invest now.
Israel is in a state of war. Families completely dug down in their beds. We have no idea where he stands. Our soldiers are fighting on the front line, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
Esta semana en News 24, Israel bajo ataque. News 24 en español trae el análisis y la información de los acontecimientos de la guerra, Espadas de Hierro.
Entrevistas exclusivas, reportes desde la zona de guerra, la reacción de los países hispanoparlantes.
News 24, el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina.
Palestina en Israel. 24 únicamente en Al 24 News.
Welcome to this breaking news edition. I'm Denise Levine, coming to you live from Tel Aviv. Israeli troops are conducting a targeted operation inside the Shifa Medical Center in the northern Gaza Strip, the largest hospital in Gaza, located above a terror command center, the Hamas underground headquarters. Troops have found weapons inside the complex, further evidence that Hamas has been using civilian sites for terror purposes. The IDF also opening a corridor for civilians to flee and to allow the transfer of medical equipment to the premises. Day 40 of the war, fighting between the IDF to eliminate Hamas following the terror onslaught in southern Israel on the 7th of October, in which more than 1,200 people were killed. Earlier today, the IDF destroyed evidence of Hamas targeted buildings in Gaza to overlook and replace footage. The current operation is complicated by the fact that the hostages of by the terror group inside the strip. Unconfirmed reports that a hostage deal is in the pipeline, one that would report to receive 50 hostages, including a 3-day ceasefire and would involve the release of Palestinian prisoners, reports. Earlier on Wednesday evening, rockets sent from the Gaza Strip to Israeli southern communities, rocket fire sent out of Lebanon towards northern Israeli communities earlier, and the United States intercepting a drone from Yemen over the Red Sea. Lots on the go. Let's start on the ground. We go straight to our correspondent, Mary McCarthy. She joins us from southern Israel. And Mary, red alert sirens sounding in several border communities just a short while ago in the south, including Kfar Aza and Sa'ad. And a short while ago, we heard the IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari assuring families of the hostages they are doing everything they can to bring them home as fighting continues inside Gaza. So what is the latest on both fronts?
That's right, Benita. We'll begin with the rocket sirens here. So in these border communities, we continue to see them being hammered by these rocket sirens throughout the day since the morning, firing a number into the southern parts of Israel. In Ashkelon, there was a report of a rocket that landed really directly in the middle of a street, but from those other rocket sirens that rang out, especially the ones from moments ago, we don't have any reports of injuries from those. Kfar Aza, of course, and many of these areas where rocket sirens keep ringing out are communities that have already been evacuated and nobody is supposed to be living there. In Stroke, we've felt a little bit of life coming back to the city, with maybe some residents also returning, but in general, for the most part, nobody is supposed to be in these areas. Many of them are closed military areas, but inside the Gaza Strip, we continue to hear the sounds of intense fighting going on. In our area, we've heard the sounds of Israeli airstrikes happening in areas of the northern part of the Gaza Strip. The Israeli army earlier today saying that they've taken over a Hamas outpost that was used to launch attacks against Israel, but we've heard these sounds of battles taking place, including gun battles, pretty near toward the border. The IDF is also dropping pamphlets in Khan Yunis, so this is an area further south inside the Gaza Strip, which could be an indication that they are planning to expand their operation as forces continue to operate in the ground. Of course, we are continuing to watch as much of the world is also what's going on inside the hospital complex, where the IDF says that it has found weapons, ammunition, grenades, and other items that there were Hamas operatives in that hospital complex. We are still waiting for more details as that operation continues. It does not seem that they have found that massive trench of weapons or that headquarters inside this hospital complex, but we also does not seem that they have gone underground yet, which is where they do believe this is where Hamas and other Palestinian terrorists were hiding underneath this complex. But we're still waiting, and the IDF says that the operation is going to continue. From the Palestinian side, we do continue to hear reports of fighting in around the El Shifa complex. Israeli tanks, armored vehicles surrounding that complex as the forces continue to move their way through the area.
Live from Southern Israel, thank you so much, correspondent Mary Cassandra. Thanks, Mary. And now for more insight into the security developments, we welcome to studio Major General in the Reserve, Eitan Rangot, former military secretary to 3 ministers of defense and former coordinator of government activities in the Palestinian territories in the IDF. Eitan, thank you so much for being here on this day. Shifa Hospital is the location, all eyes watching what is unfolding right now. A hospital above ground, a pure command center underground. What is your latest assessment of the fighting there?
I think that first, above all, Shifa Hospital is staying on the main place, on the square area, while you can point on it as the main control and command center for the Hamas. It has a lot of information for years what's going there, how it's used in a cynic way, like an hospital, together with a lot of terrorists that are moving here and there, working very freely on the area where are all the illness people, the sick people are lying in the departments, they are presented there, and the underground tunnels which are leading to many places according to what they did for years. So according to my expectations, and what is the first of all, it's a single light the Hamas fire. It's very important to say now that we are controlling all the north part of Gaza, and we are on the main and single place. Secondly, this hospital is not just an hospital, it has a command and control. We have to understand that it's a complex of 8 to 10 buildings, that there is a lot under the ground and on the ground. So we have to take patience and to see. The soldiers, the unit has to work slowly, as I say many times, is professionality, the expectation always of life is like a movie. No, it's not a movie, it's people life. You have to work slowly, you have to take care of yourself, you have to take care of the people who are not involved, that are dealing with the hospital, and you have to take care because what we make for excessive, I said, down under the tunnels, in the tunnels, it's very dangerous. So, and you have also a real-time intelligence where you have to analyze it immediately and to change your response. So it will take few days. We have to clean this place, and above all, many hospitals are deployed in this area using such a scenic place. We have to go one after the other. We have to move the people who are sick to another place so that they will get medical treatment, and we have to fight and to kill the terrorists and to destroy this drain of structure and to prevent it very freely in the future for them.
A complicated operation, as you are describing, and as you say, is going to take time. A time stay with us. Lots more to discuss right now. Let's go to our correspondent Zach Andrews, who joins us from northern Israel, where Zach sirens were sounding earlier also close to the northern border, warning of a hostile aircraft above, and then we heard the IDF spokesman saying that Israel has been targeting Hezbollah sites in response to activity out of Lebanon. So what more is confirmed? What can you tell us this hour?
Right. Well, unlike in the South where Mary is, when you can hear the action at a really consistent pace, here is spaced out. It's a lot quieter, and these quiet moments are punctured either by the outgoing Israeli artillery or the hum of something in the sky. And earlier this afternoon, it was that noise of what sounded like a drone for us. The IDF says in the 4 o'clock hour they were able to intercept hostile aircraft, they're calling it. But from what we've been able to understand, these, when they call these hostile aircraft, these are the Iranian-made drones supplied to Hezbollah that are continuing to test the Israeli air defenses here in the north and continuing really to distract the IDF and keep this front at a lukewarm temperature, keep things continuously moving along this expansive northern border. Of course, you've got mountainous terrain and quite a lot of different access points to have to keep cornered off or to keep your eyes on. There are large structures on the roads here with the border with Lebanon set in place now, temporary structures that are becoming more permanent to try and keep those roads closed and this border secure.
Thank you so much, correspondent Zach Anders, live from northern Israel. Appreciate the update. Thank you. And still with me in studio, Major General of Reserves, Eitan Dangod. So we heard my colleague Zach, they're talking about efforts to keep that front lukewarm. That was the exact quote there. But still, that concern remains around the potential for Hezbollah and Hassan Nasrallah to get fully involved. Where do things stand there 40 days into this war?
I think it will go on ahead now. If we continue till the fighting in Gaza will take place under very clear fighting principles. First of all, the Hezbollah is deployed in a very high level. So it can change and we have to be in readiness. The second, that we are deployed in a very high readiness for defense and a very high readiness from the air of attacking. If we need to change the concept, it will be done. But the fact is very important. As more as the time is passing and the Russians continue between Israel, Hezbollah, Iran, and above all, there are many United States umbrella which is closing this people and have a very clear policy to prevent a big war escalation in this area. It means that it's more or less balanced today. As long as it's passing, it continues in such a way, the chance for a war will be down. But what is the problem that the Israeli government has to face now? The issue of moving ahead, thousands of people in the first time when it was such a lot on the 7th of October, in 2 days, 48 hours, almost 70,000 people were moved to the south area, to other places, evacuate from this area. They have a very clear, they say, the population not to return under the same circumstances that Hezbollah create in the border. And the question will be, what will be Israel policy if the day after Gaza we will come to the north? There is no answer yet to the Israeli government, and it can be between you are coming to the area where will be a very clear ceasefire, or you will come to the area while Hezbollah will respect the 1701 resolution. But how to reach it, whether it will be under escalation between the both sides or under kind of international involvement, I cannot know for sure. But one thing is sure, it's not the last word for the north now.
Dito natin nilalagay mga freshly harvested na bigas dito sa Pilipinas. Alam nyo ba meron silang 5 kilos for 225 pesos. Meron din silang 25
additional marriages, 2 divorces, 1 success, 1st marriage, 24 years old, breakup after 2 years, 2nd marriage, 28 years, breakup after 6 months, 3rd marriage, 31 years old, successful with 3 children. And medical staff, while inside the person also donated incubators to newborns, baby food, and medical supplies. I'm looking at correspondent Aya Oziran has more in this report.
After much anticipation and build-up, IDF forces entered Gaza's Shifa hospital earlier this morning. A dramatic development in Israel's 40-day war with Hamas. Based on intelligence information and an operational necessity, IDF forces are carrying out a precise and targeted operation against Hamas in a specified area in the Shifa hospital. The limited raid began at 2 a.m. local time as dozens of IDF troops began searching inside the hospital and covering Hamas weapons, explosives, and assets, the army said. Prior to their entry, the forces came under fire and eliminated at least 5 terrorists. No soldiers were hurt. The IDF forces include representatives and Arab expatriates who have undergone specified training to prepare for this complex and sensitive environment, with the intent that no harm is caused to the civilians being used by Hamas as human shields. Once inside Gaza's biggest hospital, the forces also delivered incubators for newborns, baby food, and medical supplies to the hospital. According to Gaza's Director General of Hospitals, not a single bullet was fired inside the hospital since the operation began.
Everything is the good thing is well within the good thing to
control between the hospital buildings and third party. So we already establish with the patients with disobedience within the hospital. It's a very scary situation.
Despite widespread fear from Hamas, some criticism could be heard from inside the hospital in recent days, even in an interview to Qatar's Al Jazeera TV.
ما فيش بالنسبه للمقاومه اللي بتيجي بتخبى بين الناس، ليش تخبى بين الناس؟ يروح بتحكم يخبى، يعني هذه شهادات من المواطنين.
We do have information that Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad uses some hospitals in the Gaza Strip, including the Al-Shifa hospital, as a way to conceal and support their military operations and hold hostages.
During a visit to the Hakim IDF training base near Gaza, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated that Israeli forces will reach every Hamas operative in every corner of the Gaza Strip.
Do you remember when they said we wouldn't invade Gaza? We invaded. They said we wouldn't get to the outskirts of Gaza City.
I am
They
Anila
said we
Ali.
wouldn't go into Shifa
I
Hospital.
stand
We
before
wouldn't.
you
It is
as
in
a
this spirit
Muslim
that we say something
American
simple.
Pakistani,
There's no place in
friend
Gaza.
of the Jewish people.
There's no hideout, no shelter, no refuge for the Hamas murderers.
Yes.
And so, as the IDF's ground operation deepens into Gaza's hospitals, it gets closer to its final goal of defeating Hamas. But as the situation in the hospitals continues to deteriorate, the task will become even more challenging.
So for more insight, it's a pleasure to welcome international law expert Natasha Armstrong, director of UK Lawyers for Israel. She's joining us from London. Thank you so much, Natasha, for your time. All eyes on Shifa Hospital in Gaza as the IDF forces work to eliminate the Hamas threat. So let's get to the legal clarity here. Talk us through the laws of war to defeat women, terror command center, below a hospital, and troops that can navigate their way past civilian life to get to these terror sites.
Well, let's start, if I may, with the war crime of using a protected building like a hospital, the most protected building in the context of the laws of armed conflict, so much so that even a military hospital is considered to be protected under the laws of war. The war crime that Hamas
Doon
commits
sila.
by using institutions like that as command and control centers is the first issue to take up in terms of the laws of armed conflict.
They are diplomats, nakapag-aral, may nagbabasa,
Condemnation of the breaches of the laws of armed conflict by Hamas. But certainly, in terms of Israel's response, we have seen careful operations around not just Al-Shifa, but other hospitals in the Gaza Strip, despite the fact that these are legitimate military targets. That is actually customary international law, but it's also reflected in Additional Protocol 1 to the Geneva Conventions, that when these protected buildings are being used for military purposes, after warnings, they become legitimate military targets. That Israel is now going into Al-Shifa with military personnel, along with medical personnel, Arabic speakers, as we've just been reporting, and not targeting the hospitals themselves with airstrikes is testament to the proportionality assessment that the IDF conducts. Even though the hospitals become a legitimate military target, Israel seeks to prevent civilian casualties wherever it can, and its approach and the military strategy that it has adopted with respect to hospitals across Gaza are reflective of its compliance with international law, and in particular with that principle of proportionality.
patayan ng nagasaan. Pero yung mga batayan ng mga construction sa ibang bansa,
Wala.
ibang po mga namatay sa Iraq, tapos yung mga picture pa ng Iraq, ginamit pa sa Israel, Palestinian,
Sinabi mo
yun ang
pa.
ginagamit ng propaganda. Akala nila, wala ng mga ODE ang war, ganun skills. Sabi niya, there is no skills in war, mami. War sucks. Oo nga naman.
Kailan kaya kawawa naman mga sundalo mag-winter?
To facilitate the supply of third parties in this case. Now, difficulty from the outset in terms of the provision of humanitarian aid by third parties has been the long documented evident history that Hamas has of diverting those resources to its own terrorist infrastructure and its military efforts. And therefore, the requirement on Israel to facilitate third parties providing materials is obviated, arguably, or at least extremely limited. Having said that, what Israel is now doing, and I see this as particularly coming out of the fact that so much of the provision by third parties is undoubtedly diverted to Hamas purposes. Israel's initiative in providing directly aid to civilians, and indeed, as you've described, incubators, which I, for one, think is unprecedented in the context of the history of armed conflict, is all about the idea of going over and above the provisions of international law and practically seeking to help civilians in this extremely difficult, strategically complex scenario where Hamas, quite apart from breaking the rules of international law, is seeking to profit from its breaches of international law and its harm to the civilians in Gaza and generate civilian casualties as it can.
So then talk us through the impact of the media coverage of exactly what you're describing, this highly complex operation. The BBC, you're in London, apologizing for reporting incorrect information. It said medical teams and Arab speakers were being targeted by Israeli forces, as you alluded to earlier, instead of saying, in fact, IDF forces included these medical teams and Arabic speakers for the operation. The BBC did say this error fell below their usual editorial standards, but emotions are high. How damaging are mistakes like this right now?
Well, their usual editorial standards seem to be very low indeed, don't they? We've seen a consistent misrepresentation of international law and of the facts on the ground across their coverage for well over a month. What is utterly extraordinary in the context of their misrepresentation of this Reuters report in the way that you've described is that the only conclusion it can leave us with is that the BBC, as others unfortunately, appear to operate from a position where they attribute an evil intent to Israel, and that leads their reporting. It also appears to lead their decision to accept so much of what Hamas puts out as propaganda, so much so that they have been called a mouthpiece of Hamas. This reflects also their coverage of casualty figures that are put out by the Hamas-controlled health ministry. Right. So, unfortunately, even though they've apologized for the grotesque misreporting today, they haven't rowed back on so much, to the extent that they are still reporting the casualty figures that Hamas has put out from the Al-Ali hospital car park strike without any verification, and unfortunately that looks likely to continue.
Certainly is staggering, especially coming from the BBC itself. Natasha, the fate of the hostages being held by Hamas inside Gaza is obviously top of mind here. Abducting civilians, babies, women, the elderly from their homes, from a music festival. You mentioned war crimes earlier. How exactly is all of this classified under international law? Not to mention the conditions they are being held under, the lack of information, the filming of hostages, which is obviously part of the psychological warfare. Talk us through the war crimes and the crimes against humanity perpetuated by Hamas on the 7th of October and since then.
I think there are reasonable people and legal and military commentators who have been clear that this is amongst the worst atrocities that we have ever seen. Certainly war crimes, crimes against humanity, in light of the intent that Hamas has been playing, that it continues to seek to replicate the 7th of October atrocities, that it continues to fire missiles onto Israeli civilians. Let's not forget, every single one of those missiles is also a war crime because they are targeting civilians with those strikes. All of that is informed by what they say their intent is, which
7th of October and subsequently are also crimes of genocide. In that respect, there is a responsibility on the international community, on all states parties, to the Convention for the Punishment and Prevention of Genocide, to act not just on Israel, a legal obligation to respond appropriately, but also, I would argue, on the international community at large. The fact that Hamas have documented their atrocities, have celebrated their atrocities,
Posted about their atrocities.
and videoed them, of course, and put these appalling images out on social media, that is all undeniable evidence of the crimes that have been committed. And the moral equivalence that we have seen in terms of the commentary around Hamas blatant war crimes and what is being alleged against Israel is deeply, deeply troubling. And it seeks to warp the situation that Israel finds itself in, and makes it very hard indeed for the general public around the world to properly appreciate and understand the position that Israel finds itself in as the bulwark against this radical Islamist extremism, terror that seeks to annihilate, let's face it, the West. It's not just Israel.
And as you say, even though Hamas filmed these brutal attacks on the 7th of October, there are still many questioning what actually happened when they themselves wanted to film it and make it go viral as it has. We need to leave it there, but we so appreciate your insight. International law expert Natasha Harsdorf, live from London. Thank you so much for being with us on I-24 News. We will be watching to see how things unfold. Well, we're taking a quick break, but when we get back, our breaking news coverage continues. 2 minutes, and we're back. This is I-24 News, Breaking News Edition. Stay tuned.
Israel is in a state of war. Families completely gunned down in their beds. We have no idea where he stands. Our soldiers are fighting on the front line, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
Esta semana en News 24, Israel bajo ataque. News 24 en español trae el análisis y la información de los acontecimientos de la guerra, Espadas de Hierro.
Entrevistas exclusivas, reportes desde la zona de guerra, la reacción de los países hispanoparlantes.
News 24, el único medio en español que te mantiene informado y conectado con la comunidad latina en Israel. News 24, únicamente en I-24 News.
fighting in Gaza focused mainly on the Shifa hospital today, the hospital located above a Hamas terror command center. But there were plenty of developments in other arenas around the Gaza Strip. Senior defense correspondent Jonathan Reagan has the details in this report.
It used to be a major terror hub, but not anymore. This is the Palestine or Palestine outpost. It was officially described as a training facility, but various terror attacks emerged from this outpost in the northern Gaza Strip. Those terror attacks will now come to an end.
We are inside the Palestinian outpost, a major Hamas outpost, which we conquered. We destroyed much of the infrastructure and killed many terrorists.
The fighting here was intense. Like so many other outposts, Hamas was well entrenched here, mostly underground. Tens of terrorists, along with dozens of anti-tank missiles and mortars, were waiting for the incoming IDF soldiers. They were all destroyed in a combined operation from the air and from the ground.
Our entire battalion is dedicated to this mission. We finished our training and headed to battle. We found enemy infrastructure of every kind, including ammunition and tunnels. We did whatever we needed to do here, and now we are ready to head forward.
This is one of the places where the army was rushing to. In a world where symbols are meaningful, here is one symbol gone. This used to be the Gaza Parliament building controlled by Hamas. Step by step, every aspect of their control is going.
Still in studio, Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dankart, and we're also joined by our senior diplomatic correspondent, Owen Alterman. But Eitan, I want to come back to you and specifically about the latest developments inside Shifa Hospital, outside Shifa Hospital, and underneath Shifa Hospital.
I would like to emphasize about Shifa that we have been surrounding Shifa from the weekend, from Friday, Saturday, and why we have been around it and didn't go inside is because of the fact that Israel built the legitimation for entering and make the contact with the medical crew inside in order to see what is the situation, not to damage it in a way that there is still people who are getting the medical treatment and to achieve things instead of it like the incubator you reported about it. Secondly, inside Shifa, after 3 to 5 days of waiting, it's very clear that the terrorists escaped downstairs inside the deep tunnels and also took some of the equipment. But inside the department, you have technological structure, you have technical items, what they need for control and command. Secondly, around this area is the heart of the north part of Gaza by Hamas. Just to add what you heard from your reporter about the achievement in the what we call Palestine Post, a very large place that was used for organize the activities of the terrorism, to organize the launching of rockets, to organize their training and everything. It's step by step. And as we are on the days passing, you have to understand that all over this area, the fighting continues. And each 3 to 4 soldiers has to see what's going around there, whether coming terrorists from the tunnels, whether they have the launching of the anti-tank missiles, whether they have the observation post around them. It's a very complicated fighting for urban area. I may say again, it is the complicated area that has been such a war in the last 30 years that is going step by step to such well organized by Hamas on the other ground. It's not a guerrilla movement. It's an army that belongs to the state of Hamas. Last but not least, you just saw the explosion on the parliament. It's on the day that the Arab declared the independent state of the Palestinian state. And what has been done there after declared in 1988. Then Hamas in 2007 and made it very clear they throw the Fatah, divided West Bank and Gaza to the entity about the area that they are operating. What is the what's going there for how many people are there? He speaks the language, he knows the culture, he knows the sensitive places from the area, he knows immediately to tell the commander, be aware, don't take this direction or the other direction because there is a mosque or hospital. What is the thing is that Hamas is using this civilian area for hiding, for making the civilians there with first line of protecting. So it's very complicated area. And even Baltimore, when you have to move people who are wounded from the civilian from a place to place, these people under the responsibility of the commander of the battalion or the commander of the brigade has to see and to paint the picture how and where to do it. It's very complicated, very high sensitivity because such a picture under a battlefield is weak. Without getting to the human issues that you have to supply, you can build a picture like we are cruel. We are not Hamas, we are not animals of human. We are coming to defend the children that were murdered dramatically like a butcher by those people who painted their horns to their bed, and we have to return only after we will fulfill the goal of breaking Hamas structure.
Anytime there's another major goal, and that's obviously the hostages.
This is become, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this goal has been jumped to be much more urgent and much more important. We will beat Hamas. Doesn't matter you will do it tomorrow or a month from now or even half a year from now. We will control the area. Hamas ended the story to be the controller of Gaza. But instead of it, it's our own, to our civilians, after the major failure of the country to defend them inside their homes, inside their beds, we have to bring them home. This is the contract between the country, the state, and its civilian. And from my point of view, we have to do it for the future of Israel. Besides what those people are suffering or suffered or were murdered and their families, this is our future. We have to build the trust again and make it very clear to our people. We will not let it happen anymore. We thought it's ended in the Holocaust. We didn't imagine it will be after the establishment of our state. It will be for generations. The 7th of October, one thing, we have to look to our civilians to their eyes and tell them, we will protect you. Never will come such murderers again to your villages and make such a massacre.
When you make these reports around a potential hostage deal that is said to involve the release of 50 hostages in exchange for a 3-day ceasefire of sorts and potentially Palestinian prisoners as well. This is just a report. Nonetheless, it is raising the very important question about whether some kind of negotiation can exist around all hostages or some of the hostages. It's complicated.
It's a very important question to discuss, and I will start from my point of view. I'm not in uniform now, I'm not holding a state official post, but I want to demand to make the end game first. It means how we say or make it very clear that the 240 people will be released. If it will take under 3 stages, and each one will be 3 ceasefire days, we have to accept it. I'm very concerned about situation of releasing of 50 people, and then what is Hamas? Hamas is a murderers, a group of murderers that has been a state of murderers. And what does it mean? It means, listen, Hamas needs ceasefire days. Why? For bringing the people they can bring in there's something like 3 battalions that didn't damage yet. They are surrounded, but they didn't damage. They will be damaged only if we keep it very strongly surrounded. So, first of all, we have to give the bring hostages back. If it's 50 under a big agreement, releasing everybody, soldiers, female, elders, babies. My opinion is to give or to return prisoners. Doesn't matter. First of all, fulfill our duty to our civilians after such a tragedy that happened in their places they are living in.
Owen, I want to bring you in on this discussion around this potential deal to get the release of the hostages. It is just a report. Nonetheless, we're hearing the Qataris obviously are heavily involved in this. These are people who host Hamas leaders, are now the ones brokering some kind of deal. Also reports Egypt, potentially the US, we know Benjamin Netanyahu is regularly speaking as well to Joe Biden. From an international perspective, give us an understanding of the kind of input to make a deal like this actually come to fruition.
Right. Well, obviously, negotiation Israel and Hamas, let alone negotiations between Israel and Hamas in the middle of a war where Israel has declared that its goal is to, one way or another, destroy Hamas, or as I like to say, to end Hamas's control over the territory of the Gaza Strip, won't be so straightforward. It is going to require mediators. But what I think is interesting about the dynamic is the mediators are not only mediators, they're themselves players. They're countries with their own national interests and their own vulnerabilities, right? And so one of the themes over the course of the negotiation has not about been putting pressure on Hamas, although of course that's been a theme, right? How many Israeli leaders have come to the podium and said, trust us, the best way to get to a deal is by putting military pressure on Hamas. So there's that. But there's also this thing of putting pressure on Qatar, right? And using the United States, the American relationship with Qatar as a point of leverage to get the Qataris to put pressure on Hamas, for Hamas to then come to the table in a more serious way. Again, this is an idea that's come out of Israel. I don't know to what extent the United States is fully on board, because the United States, of course, needs Qatar as well. There's a major American air base there. I would imagine it's not so easy to pick up and move an air base, right? That's so important in such an unstable part of the world. But be that as it may, all of these players have their own interests. They're not simply mediators. So it is obviously very complicated, but by all accounts seems to be progressing. Of course, what's new about the last few days, Benita, is that the leaks are not coming from the side of the other guys, right? They're not coming from Qatar, or only from Qatar, or from Egypt for that matter, or from Hamas itself sometimes, where especially it's seen as psychological warfare. These are leaks coming out of Israel and being given to Israeli media, either because the Israeli government wants to lay the groundwork politically for the deal to be put out there and prepare the public for the kinds of terms that are there, and maybe it's a kind of trial balloon to see how people in television studios and on social media and in conversations outside grocery stores, how they feel about it. And maybe the other motive is to essentially be able, if the talks break down, to go to the families especially and say, we tried.
Maybe the one thing to add, and I agree for what was told here, is that Israel should demand on the list of the hostages that Hamas is keeping. Secondly, a visit of Red Cross to everybody just to keep the soil in life, because you are dealing with murderers and not believed too well about what they are telling now or what they will tell tomorrow. And we know these people are human animals, so we need insurance of steps by Red Cross, international community, and Qatar is another story. With Qatar, United States, Israel is stuck, because Qatar is the fuel station that built what we are fighting now for Hamas. And Qatar is not doing it only for itself, it's doing it for itself in order to improve its position in the world, because always Qatar always speaks from both sides. But Qatar is doing it under Hamas requested Qatar to do it, or ask Hamas to do it, because the situation of Hamas. Don't forget, the achievements of the IDF is step by step. When we saw
ceasefire and Shifa this update. Dozens of family members are getting ready to spend the second night sleeping in tents as they're marching all the way from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, taking their concern, their desperation, their heartache, really, all the way to the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's face. And every step of the way, they continue to show the faces of their loved ones, the 239 hostages who remain captive in Gaza 40 days. For 40 days now, all of these family members have not been able to sleep. They haven't been able to eat or drink or think about anything except for their family members who are still hostages. And that is why they are doing this march all the way from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem to continue to give a voice to their family members and their loved ones who have not had a voice for the past 40 days. So that's why you see these dozens of tents here for all of the different people in the community to come out here and continue to raise their concerns. Right now they're saying that they feel abandoned by the Israeli government. And so their calls right now, as they're marching this long distance through the center of Israel, they're calling on the Israeli citizens to be with them right now, to come together, because they've been abandoned by their Israeli government. So they don't want to be abandoned by their Israeli citizens as well. And I can tell you that's not the case, because we continue to see people coming out, supporting them. Dozens of people coming, providing warm meals, providing comfort, really. Just someone to even talk to, because that's been one of the most difficult parts for these past 40 days for these family members. As they can't think about anything, they're trying to surround themselves with people who understand some of the emotions that they've been